I'm here once again with Dave Hall, our retirement expert, talking all about retirement. Dave, welcome.
Thank you, CR. Glad to be back.
We love having you on the show because as we're always talking about retirement, I'd love to get your feedback as we continually dive through each person's scenario we talk here on the show.
Nice thing about retirement is nobody's is the same. So it requires a lot of planning, a lot of advice. So happy to be here to answer the questions we can.
Dave, let me start out. We're going to talk about Kristoff and his spouse, Mikayla. So they're 65 and 63. They have taken in their grandson, Jaden, who's 3 years old. Mikayla is going to be home with him while Kristoff works as an engineer for the city's construction and zoning board. Here's the follow-up. Both are in decent health, with Mikayla having some mild arthritis and blood pressure issues. So that's kind of a background of who we're talking about today. So let me get to my first question. Since her only daughter tragically passed, Kristoff and Mikayla would like to name Jaden their beneficiary on their assets and policies. How should they go about doing this?
Number one, always hard to lose a child before you pass. Luckily, I've not had to go through that process, so hard to hear that happening. But when we look at where they're at, best way we can transfer assets is through living trust. That's where we've got to start. So they really should put a living trust together that's then going to name Jaden as the beneficiary of that trust. But if not, it's going to create issues. They're going to have to take their assets through probate. They're going to have to get an attorney involved. Usually that can cost somewhere around 10% of the asset values. But the trust itself, depending on where you're at, could be anywhere from $500 to $5,000 to put together. Not trying to give prices for attorneys, but that's how they really should start down this road, is get that trust set up and make sure Jaden's shown as the beneficiary.
And Dave, a lot of times you talk about it, as we're going into retirement, we need to focus on ourselves. Well, this is a specific situation here that's a little bit different. And these guys are relatively in decent health. It looks like everything's going well. So it sounds like there's some other things they could be doing.
Yeah, they definitely need to make sure they're taking care of themselves. I mean, that's the first responsibility. Unfortunately, as parents, and I am one, 7 kids, I get it. But our first responsibility once we get them raised is really to ourselves. We need to make sure that we're preparing ourselves for our retirement. We're doing the things that we need to do. So in their situation, they're going to want to do that. Now, again, they could live 30 years. So we take Jaden now, who's saying, look, he's a minor. We're going to have maybe some financial issues if we were to pass away immediately. But once that changes, gets up into adulthood, maybe the plan changes at that point. So that's another thing I recommend for people. Even though you've got trust in place, you need to really review those on a regular basis because circumstances do change. Maybe you get a family member that doesn't need the money like they once did, and you want to give it to charity. Maybe you want to change your beneficiary at that point.
Really good advice, Dave. Let me get to my next question. They would like to leave Jaden extra inheritance. Would taking out a second life insurance policy be beneficial for this? Or should they consider a trust and putting money aside for him? And I brought that up because I knew this was coming.
Yeah, life insurance is one of the best ways to leave money to anyone when we look at it, because you're going to put a dollar amount in and they're going to get a much larger dollar amount at the end of this. So a great way to do that. Another way too, because it allows you maybe to put a certain amount of money aside that's going to grow into X dollars where you can fix that amount, saying, look, you know what, we want to have this amount of money going there. We want to ensure it happens. Let's put this portion of our retirement aside, make sure that when we pass away, whether it's in 10 years or 30 years from now, this is what's going to be given. And then we can spend the rest. We can do whatever we want. If there's something left, great. If we bounce the check to the undertaker the last day, oh, well, so be it. We lived our lives and did what we wanted to do.
And Dave, you did talk about putting money aside. So that's going to be my final question. If they put money aside for him, would it impact their taxable and tax-deferred assets?
Putting it aside is not going to. Now, where the issue comes is, where does this money come from that they're going to put aside? Now, if they've got taxable assets they've already paid taxes on, not a big issue. They've already paid the piper on those. But if they've got tax deferred assets and are going to be moving those into an insurance policy, they're going to have to pay some additional taxes there. Now, the nice thing is they're paying them at historically low rates, and it's going into a product that's tax-free. So just like a Roth account, it may be one of the best options for them is to actually start moving that money now, and not just in a situation where you're putting into life insurance, but if you're going to leave your kids other assets, especially if you've got a traditional IRA, my recommendation for most people, get the money out while you can. Get those taxes paid, because oftentimes those kids inherit at a time that it creates havoc on their tax situation.
Dave, you talked about with Kristoff and Mikayla making sure they secure their retirement first. Obviously, we're working through these things as Jaden is pretty young. What other mistake do you see as we're wrapping up here that they, somebody in this situation may make because they just haven't met with anyone and they're looking at this by saying, we're going to try to do this on our own. And then years from now, we'll maybe meet with somebody if we need to.
One of the biggest mistakes that I would see them making, and there's a high probability of it, is they don't end up claiming Social Security benefits for the grandchild. They oftentimes, you don't realize that if you're claiming your own Social Security benefits, you've got a grandchild where the parents have passed away or they become permanently disabled, and now they're your responsibility. There's opportunities to get Social Security benefits for them, which could amount to thousands and thousands of dollars, depending on the age and how much time they would have to be able to collect those benefits. So that's number one. Number two is really making sure the overall structure is right. We have a purpose behind the money we're giving. And sometimes that may require some restrictions. Unfortunately, we see so many people give millions of dollars to family members that have never had that much money. And it's like winning the lottery. Hey, I can go out, buy me a new house, buy a new car. And before they know it, $2 million went like this. And now they're trying to figure out how they maintain the lifestyle they created. So another one I would recommend is to look at trusts that would allow some dripping of that money so people can't just rush out, get themselves into assets that are going to require a lot of money to maintain, and then get to a point where, like most lottery winners, they're flat broke before they know it.
Well, very well said, Dave. And thank you so much for your advice. And if you have a particular situation you want discussed on our next show, please go ahead and get that submitted, cr@retirementriskadvisors.com, and we'll get that on one of our future shows. Dave, thanks for being here and helping us get a little closer to our retirement.
You're welcome.
We'll see you guys again next time.